All right, what is up, gang? This is your boy Mel, aka Naldo Formula One, and you are now tuned into the Naldo F1 podcast. Let's go ahead and get the elephant in the room out of the way. I had to, I had a different look, man. I had to change it up, bro. I cut off my locks, man. It was a great, 2.5 year run with the locks, almost 4 years growing my hair. And yeah, I really enjoyed it for an era, but I think that it was time to switch it up, man. I really I feel light as hell. So my locks have been cut off for maybe about a month now, and I knew I made the right decision when I just like didn't feel any regret it. I feel good. I feel like I look good. Yeah, man, I just knew that was probably gonna be the first thing on people's minds when they saw me. This is probably the first time a lot of like my people are seeing me for an extended period of time with no hair. So yeah, man, just wanted to just get that out of the way before we even got going. Yeah, I feel good, look good. Hope y'all out there are feeling good, looking good. This is not necessarily going to be a Qatar Grand Prix review. I'm kind of freestyling this episode. There is one major topic that I do want to touch on at some point, but I think that this episode is going to kind of just be off the vibes, man. Just F1 chat, just a little waffling, man, a little chit chat, talk about some things, address some stuff, clear the air, just check in with y'all, man. I miss you guys. It's been a long time. I know that in the past couple of episodes, I was talking about consistency, and I'm still on that, and I still believe in that. But life happens, and you can't always do the things that you promise. But working on it, getting better every day. I'm sure some of you might have noticed that I decided to switch it up and kind of merge my personal, like, I guess, social media and branding and stuff like that, merge that with the Naldo F1 branding and kind of leverage the following that I've already created with like the people that I already know in real life and leverage my knowledge on Formula One against with the people that I already know in real life and just kind of merge into one. So all my like main social media platforms are at some form of Naldo underscore F1. So I believe Instagram and TikTok, it's at Naldo underscore two times, like underscore F1. And then the Twitter page is at Naldo underscore Formula One. So just before we get started, just pause the video real quick or the audio. Make sure you go that you're subscribed to the show, first of all, whether you're listening to this on YouTube or on any of the audio streaming platforms, DSPs. Make sure you subscribe to the show, leave a 5-star review, download the episode, and then make sure you follow me on all my social media platforms. Hit that like button. What the kids be saying, smash that like button. If you don't smash the like button, if you don't subscribe, you don't follow me, you're a hater. Just putting it out there. Just wanted to get that out the way real quick. Just do a little bit of housekeeping. But yeah, man, let's chat Formula One. So I guess we can just talk about Qatar real quick. I'm gonna be 100% honest. I did not watch most of Qatar. I watched the first lap, and then being a Lewis fan, if you know what happened, you know that Lewis kind of took himself out on lap one in the first corner, and I was so frustrated that I just cut the race off, bro. I ain't even gonna lie to you. I cut the race off at that point. It was Sunday. It was football. I got two fantasy football teams and two paid leagues, so I take my fantasy football very seriously. My teams are all right now. I'm 3-2. I'll be 3-2 after tonight. I'm recording this on Monday evening, so we got one more game tonight, but there's no way I'm gonna win. So I won in one league, lost in the other. I'm 3-2 in both leagues now, which I'm okay with. Rome wasn't built in a day, and I believe that just my consistency is going to pan out over the course of the full season. And so I'm not too stressed about it right now. If we get to about week 7 or 8 and I'm still hovering around 500, then I'll be kind of a little worried at that point. But for now, I'm cool as a cucumber, my G's. But yeah, let's talk about Qatar. Lewis took himself out. If you didn't see it, basically Lewis started P3, George started P2. Max in P1, obviously. And then as they took off, Lewis was on softs, Max and George on medium. So Lewis was always going to have the advantage coming out of the finish line. And going into turn one, Lewis, I think, just got a little bit overzealous. George did start kind of pushing Lewis towards the outside of the track as they were approaching turn one, trying to get basically from behind Max. And three doesn't go into one. And Max kind of had the advantage. He was already ahead, but Lewis had better traction and kind of sent one pretty late on the brakes. It was a pretty audacious move, if I do say so myself. It was ambitious, but I think that Lewis had the mindset of, I'm on softer tires. This is probably going to be my only opportunity to attack Max in wheel-to-wheel racing, just because he has the car advantage. And so I'm just going to go for it. And from what I've been hearing just through social media, like outlets and reports and stuff, is that Mercedes team did talk about the fact that Lewis might have an advantage at the beginning of the race and that George was supposed to support him. But to keep a long story short, I don't think that George was at fault at all in the incident. I think Lewis was a little bit overzealous in the move. He didn't really give George anywhere to go, and George just kind of got sandwiched in. And fair enough to George. He was able to continue on in the race and actually made a brilliant recovery drive into P4 from last on the grid, essentially. And so respect to George for being able to pull that off. I think that was one of his best drives of his career, I think, at least in my opinion, and definitely by far his best drive of this season. George has struggled a lot during this season, and for him to put in a recovery drive like that on a weekend where he was basically spun out by his teammate and probably picked up a little bit of damage, I think that was really impressive and deserves a shout out. The man of the weekend, though, was Max Verstappen. He took his third title in a row, so he is Mr. 3P, one of only, I believe, 4 other drivers to ever 3P: Lewis, Vettel, Schumacher, and Fangio. I think we're the only other drivers to three-peat. So big respect to Max. I know that I can kind of like be on his case a little bit at times, and just because I don't necessarily care for him as a person, at least from the portrayal of himself that he's put out there to the public. Obviously, we don't know these people in real life. I preface by saying that is probably my biggest mantra. If you can search through my Twitter page, and like every couple of months I tweet out, because I see some nonsense about celebrities and what people tweet about celebrities as if they know them in real life. But I tweet a reminder out to everybody else and to myself too, especially, is that we do not know these people in real life. You have never met these people. They do not know you exist. You had never had a serious conversation with them. They've never engaged with you at all. We don't know these people in real life. So I'm just going off of what he's put out there into the public. And I just don't care for the attitude, but that doesn't take away from Max's talent and his ability to drive a race car very quickly. And so, yeah, Red Bull have put a great package together this year, and Max has taken full advantage of that. And he doesn't really make any mistakes. You can say that he hasn't gotten into as many incidents because he's not racing as many people. He's so far clear of the field. And the same thing happened with Lewis when Lewis was dominating, and Vettel as well. You're naturally going to get into more incidents when you're closer to the other cars around you on the grid. So Max is driving very maturely. He's driving to the best of his abilities, which is the top of the top, the cream of the crop. So respect to Max on taking his third championship. Shout out to Oscar Piastri for winning the sprint race on Saturday, taking his first win. I say win in quotations because it's not technically a Grand Prix victory, but it's still a great accomplishment as a rookie to be able to win a sprint race when you're not in the fastest car. And so shout out to Oscar. He's been putting in some great performances. He did take pole in the sprint shootout, and qualified what was that, P2? Or was that, I think that was Lando that qualified P2. Oscar qualified P4, but they both got their lap times deleted for track limits, which was a big talking point of this weekend, just due to the nature of the circuit. LaSalle is a very high-speed track, a lot of medium to high-speed corners. There's really no slow-speed corners at all around LaSalle. So it was naturally going to be one of those tracks where track limits is talked about a lot similarly to Austria. Austria is just naturally going to be a track where people are going to run wide because they're carrying so much speed through these corners. Let's see, any other notable performances this weekend? Lando put in a good performance. I don't remember where Lando finished. I think Lando was Oh, that's right. Lando was P3. They took a double podium. And Piastri was only about 5 seconds off of Max. I say only, like that's not a huge gap, but it's not as huge as we've seen for the majority of this season. So shout out to Oscar for keeping within touching distance of Max. And Lando as well. Lando, I think, was an additional like 4 or 5 seconds behind Oscar in the race. So McLaren has really turned their season around. They are kind of my team of the season so far, due to their ability to like completely turn it around. In Bahrain, and then the first probably 3 to 4 races of the season, they looked like they were absolutely like nowhere. Like McLaren they looked like one of the worst cars on the grid. And so for them to be able to completely flip that around and to be able to be putting in podium finishes on the regular is quite impressive, if I do say so myself. Like I said, George had a good recovery drive to P4. Charles finished P5, a decent result for him. Not really where I expected them to be. I expected Ferrari to be a little bit faster over the course of this weekend. I think in my pre-race predictions, which I think is something that I'm going to do a lot moving forward, is like a way too early power ranking, essentially, for who I think is going to finish where over the course of the weekend. And respect to Mercedes, they looked a lot better than I originally thought. Let me move my damn computer. Jesus Christ. I hope y'all can't hear that damn fan. My damn MacBook is going crazy right now. It's Apple doing that shit again, bro. When they start releasing new products, they start nerfing your old ones, bro, to try to force you into to upgrading. Let me see if I can find these rankings. Oh, here we go. So my way too early Qatar Grand Prix pecking order predictions was Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston, Alpine, Williams, and AlphaTauri tied for 7th. And then Alfa Romeo in 9th and Haas in 10th. And so if I just look at the qualification and how everybody finished, I was right about Red Bull and McLaren. They were the top 2 teams during the weekend. I can say that Mercedes was probably closer than I expected. Usually over the course of this season, they've struggled in the high-speed corners, so I thought that they would struggle in this race. But George's race pace looked really good on Sunday with his recovery drive. And honestly, I think that Mercedes probably had an opportunity to win this race, which makes the Lewis taking George out and taking himself out scenario even worse. But I would say I got Mercedes and Ferrari swapped. I probably should have, or I should have, had Mercedes over them. Aston, I got right, at least in the hands of Fernando. We know that Lance is not putting in his best performances recently, but Pierre had a fucking horrible weekend, at least from what I've seen. But Esteban finished right behind Fernando. Well, not right behind, but behind him in P7. The Alfa Romeo, shout out to them with a double points finish in P8 and P9. I didn't see that coming. I had them as the second worst team, so I definitely got that wrong. Williams had a tough weekend. Logan DNF due to an illness. He wasn't feeling well going into the weekend, and it was just a tough weekend physically for everybody in the cars. So tough out for Williams. Alex finished okay. He was outside the points, but there's only so many points finishers. Checo way down there in P10, man. That's a shame because he's literally in a fight right now for P2 with Lewis, and this was a great opportunity for Checo to gain some points on Lewis, and he really only gained 1 point on him, which is really pitiful. And Red Bull have kind of come out and criticized Checo pretty openly about his performances and the fact that he needs to step up, and I wholeheartedly agree. I thought they probably committed. I know he signed a 2-year deal, but they kind of came out earlier in the season and assured that there's no chance that Checo won't be in the seat for 2024. And I think that was a little bit premature because he was already reeling back then, and he's definitely reeling now, and he desperately, desperately needs a few podiums to finish out this season. We got 5 races left. We have the U.S., Mexico, Brazil, 2023. What else? U.S. Big announcement. I will be at COTA in 2 weeks. I told you guys that one way or another I was going to make it happen. Shout out to my best man, Eric. That's my guy, bro. He hooked us up with some tickets to the United States Grand Prix in Austin, and I will be there. So we definitely got some big things coming with the content as far as documenting the entire weekend and what it's going to be like in my first experience going to Formula One racing. And even as his experience with somebody who's not as passionate about the sport as I am, but has shown a real interest in it. And I think he might have caught the bug a little bit. And I definitely think he'll catch the bug once we go to the race. But yeah, man, I will be at COTA in 2 weeks, and I am absolutely gassed about it. I'm pumped up. I can't wait. We got the hotel situated right. We got everything hooked up, man. I'm like pick up some nice merch, man. I already know how that goes, man. The merch gonna be out of this world. And yeah, man, I am just super pumped, man. I can't wait for that. Yeah, man. I told you guys in a few episodes that I was gonna do my best to make it happen. And one way or another, I was going to end up there. And that is exactly what happened. So look at God, man, coming through for the boy. Yeah, 5 races left: U.S., Mexico, Brazil, and then we go back to the U.S. for the Vegas Grand Prix, and we finish up in Abu Dhabi on the 24th weekend, like the weekend of the 24th of November. Yeah, so 5 races left. It's going to be a dogfight for P2 in the World Championship. I am hoping and having my fingers crossed that Lewis comes through and that he snatches that P2. That would be a big result for Lewis and for the team, even though it's not what Lewis would want it, how his season would have went in his head and his ideal like vision for the 2023, but you got to make the best of what you're given. I'm hoping that he can maybe snag a win in one of these last couple races. I know Mercedes are bringing a couple upgrades to finish out the season. James Allison, their technical director, has came out and said that they're not huge upgrades. They're just kind of minor things, and hoping that they're going in the right direction for 2024, which, fingers crossed, we're going to hope that 2024 means back into championship contention, but I am not holding my breath for that one. I'm just going to have wishful thinking. Let's put it that way. Back to my rankings. Yeah, I had Williams 7th. They didn't have a great weekend. AlphaTauri, they did okay. I think Lawson struggled this weekend. Sonoda had an okay weekend. yeah, Lawson finished last and he was a lap down. And then Sonoda was also a lap down and was 15th. So they were down towards the bottom of the field, which I kind of predicted. And then Haas being last, you can say that their performance was pretty bad. Nico Hulkenberg actually looked pretty good in Saturday in the sprint, but that pace just didn't translate over to the race, which was a struggle for a lot of teams just due to some tire issues with Pirelli. Basically, Pirelli had and the FIA had worries that the tires weren't going to last and that you could have tire failures and explosions and like blowouts and stuff over the course of the race. So they put a 18 lap maximum stint like per tire. So drivers were only able to run each tire compound up to 18 laps, which kind of made the race super confusing and pit stops really weird but predictable. But the race was kind of a chaos, but it was, I don't know. But yeah, like that was kind of a mess. So I hope they get that sorted out for next year. It has something to do with the curbs and how aggressive they are. I mean, I'll put a picture up, but the curbs they literally like pyramids. Like they're humongous, man. And I don't even want to know what it felt like driving over those things. And yeah, the drivers just really struggled this weekend. It was super physical. It was hot as hell in Qatar this weekend. Let me look up the weather. I know it was like 30 degrees C. I don't know what 30 degrees C is in the Fahrenheit. Let me see. So it was like 88 degrees, but the humidity was super high. So, and you got to think these drivers are pulling these high Gs through these all these high speed corners. So it was definitely wear on the body. There was a clip going around of Charles when he was in the car. You could see at the beginning he's very stable, holding his neck up fine, and then towards the end, his neck, as he's going through corners, his neck just kind of leans on the side of the cockpit, and it's just like every time he goes through a corner, his head is just like touching the side of the cockpit, so you could tell it was wearing him down. The drivers look absolutely gassed after the race. I mean, Esteban Ocon threw up in his helmet after lap 15 and didn't tell the team. Nobody found out until after the race. Lando came out and said that a few drivers almost passed out in the in the driver's lounge. Lance Stroll almost collapsed and had to take himself to the ambulance car after the race. Alex Albon, I think, had to get himself checked out because he's feeling like he's going to pass out. It was just really rough conditions. And so hopefully the FIA and Formula One can get that sorted out for next year so we don't have these same problems, because this sport is risky, man. It's always going to be a physical challenge when you're dealing with these kind of forces on your body and with these kind of temperatures. It's just always going to be a struggle. But that kind of leads me and segues me into the big topic that I wanted to talk about this episode, which is Formula One drivers being athletes, because I think that there's a lot of talk that I've heard, at least from the casual like fans, or not even fans, but people who may know just a little bit about racing but not really understand the full extent as to how intense it actually is. So at least specifically speaking with Formula One, a lot of this applies to racing across the board, whether it be like GT3 or endurance racing or IndyCar, things like that. But Formula One being the pinnacle of motorsport, this applies the most to them because of the forces that they're experiencing. But just to put it bluntly, man, Formula One drivers are fucking athletes, bro. These guys are the cream of the crop. They are top athletes. They may not look it just from like the eye test, but these guys are supreme athletes. Now, there are some restrictions with Formula One drivers, so obviously they're not going to look like like American football players or like basketball players, just because weight is so much a thing with Formula One. Like your pounds and your kilograms and your ounces, all of these little like measurements matter so much within Formula One racing. Like these guys are fighting for tenths and thousandths of a second on a lap. And so I think Lewis Hamilton did a interview on some late night talk show where he was talking about his weight and how if he's like 1 kilo overweight, that can cost him 2 or 3 tenths a lap in the car, which is a humongous amount of time. So these guys are super conscious about how much they weigh and their size, which is why most Formula One drivers are pretty small in stature. Like I think the tallest driver, I think is Esteban Ocon, and he's like 6'1" or maybe 6'2". I know George is pretty tall too, but most drivers are gonna fall in the range of about 5'7" to 5'10" to 11. I think Lewis is like 5'8", which is about average height for a male. But yeah, they're usually pretty small in stature just because that weight is so important to them. And then as far as like physique, most of them are pretty like slender. They usually have really wide, like muscular necks. Pause. But seriously, like due to the G forces that they have to experience, their necks are really like muscular, and they spend a lot of time training them. And if you're not familiar with what G forces is, it's basically like the forces that you experience due to high speed change of direction. So G's are just like the X of your body weight. So your average Formula One driver is pulling like 2 G's on acceleration. So when they take off from a standstill, you're pulling 2 times your body weight. Your body feels 2 times heavier than it naturally is on acceleration. So if you've driven or ridden in a fast car, that feeling of when they hit the gas and it takes off and it pushes you back into the seat, that's G forces. And even the fastest road cars in the world, you're pulling maybe 1 G, a little bit over 1 G on acceleration. And these guys are pulling 2 G's on acceleration. They can pull up to 6 G's on heavy braking moving forward. So like as you're braking, your head is getting thrown, your body's getting thrown forward in the car. And through high speed corners, they can pull 5.5 G through like lateral G's through corners. And so that's a lot of strain on your neck, your core, and your legs. So that's where they focus most of their training is the neck, the core, and having strong legs. Because if you talk to like fighter pilots who experience like the highest G forces on earth, these guys are pulling like 7, 8 G in high speed turning and fighter jets. But you have to like squeeze your legs together, tighten your core, and basically like just like there's G training. And so they go through a lot of that. They have specialized equipment that they use. A lot of it is very similar to what every athlete does, which is like natural like weight training regimens and cardio, a lot of running, a lot of biking, a lot of swimming. A lot of them do like boxing workouts. And so yeah, like they train so intensely throughout the season to stay in shape and to be able to handle these forces, because you're experiencing that every single lap. And so you have a 50 to 70 lap race, and then you have 2 1 hour practice session, or no, 2 1.5 hour practice sessions, 1 1 hour practice session, and then you have qualifying, which is going to take you about an hour. So you're feeling these G forces over the course of an entire weekend. And so imagine having to deal with all of that physicality. And not to mention that it's hot as hell in there most of the time. Like F1 cars don't have no AC or nothing like that. And the only cooling that you're getting is the wind that's flying through. But you got this big helmet on, you got a full fireproof like race suit, you got layers underneath that, you got gloves on, boots. Like it's hot as hell in there, bro. So yeah, like they're experiencing all these forces all while being hot as hell. And then you got this big ass engine in it. Well, it's not technically a big engine, but you got this fucking engine behind you that's hot as hell, producing all this heat. You got brakes around you that are producing a bunch of heat, thousands of degrees of heat when you're braking. And so there's nothing but just heat and forces on you throughout the whole race. So as you can probably imagine, like these guys' body is under a lot of stress on any given weekend. And so they have to train like pro athletes because that's what they are. And a lot of times they're doing this training as early as like their teenage years, because now Formula One has gotten to a point where the drivers are so young that they're getting into Formula One at like 20 or 21 years old. I mean, Max Verstappen started racing in Formula One when he was 17. So can you imagine, like, most of y'all can't drive like regular cars right now at a high level, let alone being able to drive the fastest cars in the entire world at a high level and being one of only 20 drivers in your sport. So it's a really like high level accomplishment just to be able to drive these cars. I remember, I don't recall his name, but I remember watching a YouTube video when I first started getting into Formula One of this media member, and he got the opportunity to drive like an older Formula One car from like 2016 or 17, something like that. And he was saying how the first corner that he went into, that he, like, his head just immediately just went straight down. Like, he couldn't see anything. Like, the brakes were so intense that his head just flopped over and he literally couldn't see anything. And then he gets on the accelerator and his head flies back into the seat, and he's going through corners, and he's just flopping around. He's getting ragdolled in the car essentially. And that's been a common theme with Formula One cars. Even F2 drivers transitioning to F1, they usually get asked, like, what's the biggest difference in what you've experienced going from F2 to F1? And, like, most of them say it's the brakes. The brakes are so much more intense in Formula One cars than any other car that I've driven. So you can just imagine the level of strength and fitness that they have to be in to be able to drive these cars. I mean, that same media member, they did a brake test and they told him like to press the brakes, and he pressed it. Like he pressed them, and they're like, okay, you need to press them harder. Like, and he's pressing them, and they're like, you need to press them harder. And he's like stomping it, like pressing it as hard as he physically can. And they're like, okay, you hit 75% brake pressure, and you need to hit that every single corner or the brakes won't work at all. So you can imagine how strong like their calf muscles and like their quads and stuff have to be able to do that over and over and over again, multiple times a lap. So it's really impressive, man, the things that these guys are able to do as athletes. Obviously, you can't necessarily put them on like a football field or a basketball court and expect them to be able to perform at a high level, but it's a lot like cheerleading in my eyes, in the fact that of what people's perception is of it, because a lot of people look at cheerleading like it's not a sport, but then you see a lot of cheerleaders perform, and these guys, like these women and these guys, are athletes, man, and the gymnastics and like tumbling and like flying that they do, and the same thing in Formula One, like the way that they're able to control these cars. These cars do not drive themselves, and it takes a very highly skilled and highly trained person to be able to just keep it on track, let alone be able to drive fast, and be able to drive fast when there's other people millimeters from you from a high-speed crash going 200 plus miles an hour. So I just wanted to kind of like talk about that a little bit and give you guys some perspective on what it really takes to be a Formula One driver and how intense it is, and just the fact that you can't jump into one and just think that you're going to be fast and think that you're going to be good. One thing that I also admire about their training regimens is how different they are. Each driver kind of has their own approach, and there's no right way or wrong way to be able to handle me driving in Formula One and training for driving in Formula One. I know Lewis does a lot of running, a lot of weight training, but again, you can't weight train too much because you don't want to get bulky and have your upper body be super bulky, because you need a low center of gravity because of the way that they're sitting in the car. So I'm not going to show it for example, but essentially they're laying down in the cars. I'll put a picture up actually. They're laying down in the car, and so like their back is almost on the ground and their legs are up at like eye level in the car, or not necessarily eye level, but close to it. And so they're laying down in the car, so you have to have a low center of gravity to be able to press the pedals and control the car and handle those G-forces. But yeah, the level of difference that it takes, or that you can approach things with, and drivers will hire trainers, and these guys are super knowledgeable about how exactly they're going to go about their training regimen for this specific driver, because the way you train one driver is not going to work for another driver necessarily. So just seeing that, the way that they eat, the way they take care of their bodies. I know there's a big running joke about Max, and like how he looks like from the outside, just from like an eye test type of situation. But again, like even the training that these guys do. I mean, I think I'll try to find a GIF and see if I can put a GIF up of like the little neck exercises that they do, where they put like the little straps like on their head, and they put like a weighted resistance, like a highly weighted resistance, and they gotta like pull against it with their neck. Or there's a video out there of Checo on this little like steering wheel type of machine, like exercise machine, and he's like literally cranking this steering wheel back and forth, and like sweating his ass off trying to like do this workout. And these are long gone are the days of like the 70s and 80s, where these drivers look out of shape, and like they smoking cigars and cigarettes when they not in the car, and like they just look like Joe Blows, like your average Joe plumbers and stuff like that. That's not the case anymore. That is absolutely not the case anymore. These guys are very much high level athletes, like I've said before. And yeah, these cars are so highly advanced that it takes like so much to be able to drive them and be able to maintain them. But yeah, man, to some news. I made a clip about this on my TikTok page. If you're not following, again, go follow. If you're not, you're a hater. But I talked about this a little bit on my TikTok page, but Andretti, they've moved on from phase one of the entry process. So they've gotten approval, like their application has been approved by the FIA, and they will be allowed to move on to the next phase of their application, which is negotiating with FOM or F1 Media. And this is going to be a lot of commercial negotiations and trying to get licensing agreements and figure out the value that Andretti could bring to Formula One, which is kind of where I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant. So right now, F1 has 10 teams, and Andretti is looking to be the 11th team on the grid. They're not looking for like a buyout like what Audi is doing with Alfa Romeo next year, where they're going to transition, going to buy essentially a team that already exists. Andretti is building a team from the ground up alongside Cadillac, who is going to kind of be their backing with money and development and technology and stuff like that. Andretti is looking to bring in a whole new package, which is super exciting, especially being an American fan. Like, Andretti is a well-respected name in racing. And even if you don't know shit about racing, most people know who Mario Andretti is. And so for them to be trying to enter Formula One, I think is outstanding. I would love to see another team on the grid. That's two more cars on the grid, two more opportunities for young drivers. Like Lewis Hamilton said earlier this week, potentially women drivers. And so to hear that they're potentially going to run into a blockade with FOM, I don't understand it. The teams, I cut the teams some slack because the teams are always going to be selfish. They don't want to split the pie another way. The pie being the money. They don't want to split the money another way, and they don't want another team to compete with. And I understand that. Like, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I get it. Like, the teams are never going to want another team on the grid to compete with and that they have to split money with. But F1 Media, at least from like some of the articles I've read and videos that I've read from other creators, that they've been lukewarm at best as far as their attitude concerning Andretti Cadillac. I personally I don't get it. Like, I think that Andretti Cadillac would bring so much excitement to Formula One, and I think that they would just bring a new energy and a fresh like face for people to latch onto and hold on to. I know me personally, I would automatically become a fan because yes, Haas is an American F1 team, but they don't, in my opinion, they don't embrace being American enough. I think they kind of tried to fit in with the rest of the teams who are mostly European, and I think that has hurt them commercially. And let's just keep it a buck, man. Americans, we don't fuck with losers, and they suck. So I was having this conversation with my coworker a little bit earlier today, and that is one thing with Americans in sports is we don't stick behind losers for very long. And they had a good initial season and they had a couple good results over the course of the years, but they haven't accomplished a damn thing. They suck. And so it's hard to get behind them, especially when they're not on TV for most of the race. You barely see them at all. And so it's kind of hard to cheer for them when you don't see them. So yeah, I think Andretti would kind of fix that problem and tap into a market that I think has mostly been untouched for the most part of like the course of Formula One. I don't think that we've had an American team that has actually been able to like captivate the fans and like actually get some engagement and tap into American sponsorship and things like that. So for them to kind of have the attitude of like we don't really understand the value that you bring to F1, I completely disagree. I don't understand that like whatsoever, and I think that they add a lot of value just from the outside looking in. I think they add a shit ton of value to Formula One as a brand and something that will bring in new fans, something that older people who don't know anything about Formula One can get behind. And yeah, man, that's kind of my little rant. I really am hoping and praying that Andretti end up getting into Formula One. I want to see more teams on the grid. Hell, I want to see 12 teams on the grid. Mohammed bin Sulayem came out, the president of F1 came out and said that he's the president of FIA, not F1. Said that he wants more races or less races and more teams on the grid, which I wholeheartedly agree with. I don't think we need this many races, but realistically, I know that that's not going to change. So I think the next best solution is more teams. More competition is going to push everybody a little bit harder and just give us some fresh faces in Formula One. I mean, it's been the same guys winning for the better part of like 50 years. It's been McLaren, it's been Mercedes, it's been Red Bull, it's been Ferrari, it's been Williams at times. And that's pretty much been it for the entire history of Formula One. So, yeah, man, that's pretty much it. I think I'm going to wrap it there. I don't really have anything too pressing that I want to touch on. Yeah, got some things in the works in the background. So, again, make sure you follow me on all social media platforms. Make sure you subscribe to the show. If you got any questions, I think I want to start taking some like listeners and viewers questions about Formula One. So if there's anything like you don't fully understand and want me to explain a little bit more, let me know. Hit me up, and I'll try to touch on it on the show. But yeah, man, appreciate you guys for tuning in, and it feels good to be back. I really enjoyed that episode, just kind of freestyling off the dome. And I hope I gave you some perspective on what it's like to be a Formula One driver and how intense it is physically. So yeah, man, I will see you guys on the next one. I'm out. Peace.